My name is Michael Iannini, author of Hidden in Plain Sight, Realizing the Full Potential of Middle Leaders. The most important role that any leader has is to develop leaders. The most effective way to develop leaders is when senior leaders actively mentor middle leaders to participate in and lead whole school change initiatives. When senior leadership is engaged, committed, and involved in professional learning, it translates into a culture of learning that sustains itself. It is often assumed that aspiring senior leaders and senior leaders themselves engage in self-directed PD by reading and attending conferences and workshops. These individual professional learning tracks, though, don't always contribute to the development of the school, and in particular, the developing of the next generation of leaders for the school. This presentation, The Leadership of Learning, is intended for educational leaders with responsibility for planning, facilitating, or supporting leadership development in their school. I will share my experience and strategies for how I ensure leadership development programs don't just contribute to developing aspiring senior leaders, but also develop senior leadership capabilities during the process. Within the next 15 minutes, I will share with you 6 evidence-based strategies for developing leaders at all levels within your school. These 6 strategies are articulated in the first 6 chapters of my book and are sequenced to ensure maximum impact for any leadership development pathway. The final 5 chapters are a narration of my popular middle leadership course, Leading Effective Teams, and provides detailed activities for middle leaders to move their teams through each stage of team development, as well as detailed instructions for facilitating these activities. These chapters also provide very practical advice and tools for facilitating effective meetings and navigating difficult conversations. Let's now begin constructing a development plan for the typical middle leader's development, our heads of subject, grade, coordinators, and deputies. The starting point for any team is that every team member is unique in how they experience, process, and communicate information. Every team member differs in the role they prefer to play, as well as how they handle conflict. Middle leaders don't have the luxury of picking their team members to try to mitigate these differences, but schools do have the luxury of selecting the right middle leader. The leadership development process begins with ensuring the right person has been selected to lead the right team or project. If we have selected someone that is not bought into the expectations that have been set for them, or ensure they are capacity built to lead the team or initiative that has been assigned to them, then they won't develop from the challenge they will ultimately face. Instead, they will most likely retreat from those challenges. One of the greatest challenges middle leaders will face is capacity building a team to transformatively collaborate. In an ideal situation, most school leaders envision teacher-led teams working in a collaborative state. The desire for this collaboration stems not only from the proven positive correlation between team collaboration and student learning, but also because senior leaders need middle leaders to help them see through improvement initiatives. In order for teams to work collaboratively, interdependence amongst team members, by which I mean engaging in work that requires shared beliefs, goals, and most important, trust, is essential. Working interdependently harnesses the collective knowledge of the team and broadens the perspective that can immediately be applied across classrooms, grades, and subjects. Working interdependently is also often the source of greatest conflict. Teams that are unable to mitigate conflict, especially conflict that results from school-wide change initiatives, will become passive and retreat into silos and require senior leadership intervention. When senior leaders are made aware of this type of conflict that surfaces above the team, it prevents them from orchestrating initiatives across the greater community. So, who will take responsibility to foster interdependence among team members? Who will align the work of the team with the school's strategic objectives? Who will clarify the work of the team and the role each member plays? Who will motivate and keep the team on track? Who will mitigate conflict at the team level so that senior leadership can stay focused on the bigger picture? The first strategy I want to introduce to you now is my 3-dimensional criteria for selecting the right middle leader. Successful leadership at any level is a multi-dimensional gambit, and ensuring the right leader is chosen requires a critical assessment on 3 different levels. First is team. Is the team capable of working interdependently towards a common goal? Second, outcome. What is the team expected to achieve? Third, capability. What leadership characteristics are necessary at this time? These three dimensions are not just a matter of aligning people, purpose, and time, but a way of defining the antecedents for success. Answering these questions also becomes the starting point for developing the capacity of middle leaders. A senior leader once told me, "I struggle to separate from the idea that solid recruitment negates the need for training. If we are all professional and motivated, then teams automatically should be collaborative." This quote presumes that professionalism means working collaboratively is the responsibility of the individual, or essentially is what makes them professional. It is also a common bias found in all schools, that if we hire professionals, they'll behave professionally, and a team of professionals will be able to communicate effectively, keep each other motivated, and resolve their own conflict. Now, unfortunately, this is not always the case. To overcome barriers to collaboration, senior leaders first need to acknowledge that professionalism is not the issue. The issue is aligning the interests and needs of a disparate group of individuals. Terms such as professional bias our perception of people, as well as misguide our judgment for their development needs. Professionalism is a subjective value that also greatly influences the culture of a team and school. A simple method to understand why labeling a behavior as professional or not professional undermines collaboration would be to ask each member of a team to identify attributes associated with highly professional people. The result of this activity will yield some overlap of identified attributes, but more importantly, it will reveal disparity. The disparity in how professionalism is defined becomes a significant issue when conflict arises, and can largely be attributed to the values and beliefs we hold for how a professional should act. The attributes associated with being professional or collaborating will vary from culture to culture. In Chapter 8, I introduce an activity based on implicit leadership belief theory that not only helps teams build consensus on a definition for effective team leadership, but also provides greater background on this theory. Understanding and controlling for these biases will greatly improve how we identify and provision leadership development resources. Therefore, when taking culture into consideration and trying to foster a culture of transformative collaboration, a balance needs to be struck between the development needs of the leader and the team. Strategy 2. Here, I provide a simple facilitation tool for how multiple stakeholders that will work with and be influenced by the prospective middle leader can contribute feedback to understand the culture they must succeed in. Taking this multiple stakeholder approach to identifying the personal and professional interpersonal attributes that a middle leader will need to collaborate successfully with their team and other leaders will help to ensure a collaborative team culture. Not all teams are equal, nor will all teams respond similarly to a commonly understood objective. Teams move in and out of different stages, so we can't hold all teams accountable to the same expectations and administrative processes. Therefore, we need to differentiate our expectations for the team leader and provision support and resources commensurate with their development needs. An example of how schools fail to recognize this and miss the opportunity to address it productively is when they hold in-service PD days and send all of their middle leaders to the same workshop. Ultimately, some may walk away inspired with tools that are immediately applicable, but most will struggle to connect with the content, especially how to apply what was taught, because it doesn't seem relevant to their team. This is also symptomatic of what I call the silo dilemma. The silo dilemma is the result of teams building up walls between themselves and other grades and departments, based on the belief that they can't learn with or from other teams. You can't foster collaboration within a team, let alone across teams, if there are no shared beliefs or values. Like pieces of a puzzle, senior leadership need to take time to ensure the pieces fit together correctly, gluing them with those shared beliefs and values. Trying to force any of the pieces together will ultimately yield a less than attractive picture. Now, if we accept this premise, then that same in-service PD day for middle leaders should be less about what the school expects middle leaders to be able to do and be more about helping the middle leaders understand their relationship to each other. The in-service PD day should focus more on the middle leaders as a team, and as a middle leadership team, they then have a shared platform to experience and apply their learning. Strategy 3 then is, if successfully managing change or developing a collaborative culture is vital to the school's success, then creating a middle leadership team is essential. As a separate team, middle leaders will provide critical peer support and be able to experience the practice of crossbreeding ideas insulated from the naysayers scattered across the school. If we can get middle leaders experiencing and demonstrating transformative collaboration with a team formed for that purpose, the middle leadership team, then we can expect them to drive that form of collaboration in their team. Strategy 4 requires the careful coordination and alignment of several principles and processes. Many teachers and administrators feel they collaborate effectively. Several engage in common planning activities. Some engage with peers to present work and solicit feedback. A few even meet to analyze data and identify areas for improvement with the intent to improve each other's practice. The activities I just described are what I consider to be part of the collaboration spectrum. This spectrum has two ends, transactional and transformative. At the transactional end of the spectrum is the work that teams are expected to deliver, their deliverables, and be evaluated on, such as common planning activities and presenting work for feedback. On the transformative end of the spectrum, teams engage in values-based activities that cause changes in attitudes, behavior, and knowledge, or what I refer to as transformative collaboration. Team members work interdependently and believe they have a responsibility for all students, not just theirs. Transactional and transformational collaboration is best understood by understanding the difference between outputs and outcomes. I consider transactions, or more specifically tasks, such as lesson planning and grading, as outputs. Outputs are products of a defined process that individuals can often deliver on their own. They may need supervision and instruction to understand the process, but once they have the necessary knowledge, they should be able to produce the desired outputs. Outcomes, on the other hand, are the culmination of multiple outputs that will influence knowledge, skills, and even the culture. Ideally, middle leaders align their development with the guiding principles and strategic aims of the school. Additionally, they will get individual team member buy-in to align their developmental objectives similarly, so that the team aligns with the school. True leadership development will be realized by striving to realize an outcome. This is what will stretch and build the leader's capacity. To achieve this, the middle leader needs to not only be able to articulate the guiding principles of the school, but understand and buy into the strategic aims. Next, they must influence, get buy-in, and build consensus on the outcome the team will work towards. Realizing the outcome will require them to identify the multiple outputs that team members must contribute, the processes that are required to produce those outputs, and the inputs that the team must use to facilitate those processes. Several of the inputs and the processes the middle leader will be stretched to develop and will require them to lean on their team, as well as develop essential skills such as delegation, so that they can develop those inputs and processes with the team. If those processes or inputs don't exist, then those become outputs, which means it will take longer to realize the desired outcome, thus changing the expectations for what the team can achieve in the desired set time. The most effective way middle leaders and their teams will develop from embedding their learning into their work is by establishing a sandbox. In corporate IT parlance, sandboxes are insulated testing grounds that allow programmers to develop and test applications before releasing them into the real world. The sandbox begins as a clean room, void of any possible contaminants, but it ultimately is intended to be a simulation of the operating environment the applications will be used in. Sandboxes in this way have several iterations with the intent of progressively getting closer and closer to real-world operations, with integration, acceptance, and alpha and beta tests. It is because of this iterative progression that sandboxes are not silos. Applications have proven ready for release because there has already been a significant amount of interaction between the applications and the world that awaits them. To effectively execute Strategy 5, then, it is the responsibility of senior leaders to ensure that middle leaders and their teams have a clean sandbox to pursue transformative initiatives in. The cleaner the sandbox, the more likely they will be able to learn and hone the skills for transformative collaboration. A few things senior leaders need to do to establish the sandbox are: 1. Make the outcome clear and ensure buy-in. 2. Identify all stakeholders that need to be in or on the periphery of the sandbox. 3. Clarify the roles for these stakeholders. 4. Does everyone on the team need to be in the sandbox? I would argue no. Just like not all teams are being equal, we also need to accept that not all members of a team have the same capacity and capabilities to pursue transformative change. This latter point will be especially welcome by a middle leader that is struggling to get buy-in to an initiative. Strategy 6 is a well-documented and thoroughly researched leadership development strategy, the 70-20-10 rule of leadership development. Research has shown that 70% of leadership development comes from on-the-job work experience, and specifically overcoming challenges. 20% is support provided by superiors or peers, and 10% is formal structured learning. The most effective way to implement the 70-20-10 model is when schools have mentoring programs. It is the mentor's job to devise this development map. Here I provide a simple example of the 70-20-10 model that is a development map for improving delegation skills. The learning journey begins in the 20% column, as that is where the development need is identified, and then relevant learning tracks or actions can be decided upon. As the mentee gets directed towards learning opportunities, 10% of their development, they will be introduced to new ideas and tools that they can apply in their work, which is 70% of the development. As the mentee moves from one column to the other, they constantly interact with the mentor to review their progress and identify next steps. Mentoring is also a leadership development track for senior leaders. When mentoring is introduced to a school, it provides a dual development track for middle and senior leaders. Both tracks working in parallel will ensure greater success in achieving school-wide objectives. Schools that empower their middle leaders to take ownership of their development and provision ample support will: Strategy 1. Take into account the several dimensions that influence leading successfully. Strategy 2. Use a multi-stakeholder approach to identify the interpersonal attributes a middle leader needs to be successful. Strategy 3. Provide a platform for middle leaders to share resources and best practices that can also work to communicate with senior leaders. Strategy 4. Evaluate leaders on outcomes that will align with the school's guiding principles and strategic aims. Strategy 5. Secure a space for middle leaders and their teams to develop. And Strategy 6. Personalize the development plans for each leader. Please visit my website, www.middleleader.com, where you can learn more about me and my book, as well as find a variety of free leadership development resources. It has been a pleasure sharing with you strategies from my book for empowering and developing middle leaders. I hope you take time to learn more about me and my work from these social media platforms and my websites.